everyone. So this is the third and last lecture on the theory of moving charge and magnetism. Today we will discuss force on parallel wires carrying current and galvanometer. So firstly, let's see a magnetic force on a current carrying conductor. So you can see the diagram. In the diagram, we have a wire and we consider the length of this wire as L. And we consider positive charges. Okay, we can, for simplicity, we are not considering the electrons here because earlier you have done these derivations by considering the electrons. So we consider these positive charges. Okay, so these are going from, like, one positive charge is going from left to right, covering L length of the wire in time t. Okay, so this is the velocity vector. So in such a case, the current is along the right, and magnetic field is entering perpendicular to the page, perpendicularly inwards. So if you apply the Fleming's left hand rule, then fixing the velocity vector with the middle finger towards the right, the magnetic field perpendicularly inwards the page, then the force is in the upward direction, right? So uh, the magnetic force relation, as we know, we have covered this in the previous lecture, QVB sine theta, right? So this velocity can be written as length by time into B sine theta, and Q by T can be written as I, current I, LB sine theta. So this is the relation for F. F is ILB sine theta. Now in vector form, you will write this as IL cross B. IL cross B. Okay, so if theta equal to 90, if theta equal to 90 degree, then F equal to ILB. Maximum force will act on the wire. Okay. Next, force between two infinitely long current carrying wires. So here we have two situations. In the first diagram, you have these two wires. They are carrying current in the same direction, upward direction. In the second figure, you have current being carried in the opposite direction. Okay. In the left wire, you have upward. In the right wire, you have downward direction. Now, firstly, we need to find out the direction of the magnetic field here. So due to current I1, the magnetic field acting here, like towards the right of this wire, will be perpendicularly inside the page. Okay, so you see this is acting perpendicularly inside. Now if you apply the right hand thumb rule, then you see if you fix the direction of the current along the thumb, then the direction in which your finger curls will show you the direction of the magnetic field. So the magnetic field will tend to enter inside this way, and it will come out from here. It will come out, and here it will enter. So at this point where it is shown with a cross here, cross means the magnetic field lines are going inside, perpendicularly inside. So B1 is entering inside. B1 is the field due to current I1. Similarly, the field due to magnetic field due to current I2 is acting outwards at this point, right? This B2 field. So again, if you apply the right hand thumb rule, so you see that the field lines tend to, since the current is in the upward direction, so the field lines tend to come outside this way and they tend to enter this way, right? So here it will act, the field line and the magnetic field will be directed outside. Now we can apply Fleming's left hand rule to find the direction of the force. So in the left wire, in the first wire, if you apply Fleming's left hand rule, the current is in the upward direction, represented by the middle finger. The index finger is showing you the direction of the magnetic field B2, which is outside. Then the magnetic force, that is F1, is acting along the right. Okay. For the second wire, the magnetic field is inward the page. Therefore, it is represented by B1. The index finger is showing that magnetic field is entering inside the page. The middle finger is showing you the current is in the upward direction. Then the force F2. Okay, the force is represented by the thumb. It is acting along the left. So you see that when currents are being carried by the wire in the same direction, then the wires attract each other with forces F1 and F2. Now the case is different when you see the currents are in the opposite direction. So here, if the current is in the upward direction, then if you apply the right hand thumb rule, then by that you see that the magnetic field at the point here, at this point, is invert the page. B1 is invert the page, which is due to current I1. Now if the current is going in the downward direction in the second wire, that is I2. For I2, if since I2 is along the downward direction, therefore the direction in which your finger curls, it is showing that the magnetic field B2 due to current I2 is also in the inward direction. Okay, it is also in the inward direction. So now the direction of the magnetic field is determined. So if you apply the Fleming's left hand rule in the first wire, so the current direction is upward, shown by the middle finger. The magnetic field is invert the page, shown by the index finger. Then the thumb is showing you the direction of the magnetic force F1 is acting along the left. For the second wire, the current is in the downward direction, shown by the middle finger. The magnetic field is entering perpendicularly inside the page. The force is along the right. So here the wires repel each other. So now let's get into the relation. Two parallel wires carrying current in the first diagram, that is represented by A. Okay, in the same direction when current is in the same direction, the wires attract each other with force. We'll write that generally. Now when current is in the opposite direction, the wires repel each other with force F1 equal to F2 equal to mu naught by 4 pi 2 I1 I2 divided by A, where A is the distance between the two wires. Okay, this can be shown with derivation. This relation can be reached with the help of derivation. Okay. So our next topic is torque acting on a current carrying loop. Now we consider a loop here. PQRS is a loop, right? And you see that the current is carried in the anti-clockwise direction. This blue indicators, the blue arrows are showing you the direction of the current in the loop. And these are the north pole and south pole, the poles, the poles, magnetic poles, in between which you have placed this current carrying loop. So the magnetic field direction is from left to right. Okay, so B represented in yellow, and the current direction is represented by blue arrows. So this is the area vector, direction of the area vector. Okay, the area vector is always perpendicular to the plane of the coil. So n cap is here acting upward. Magnetic field is acting along the right. Now, if you apply the Fleming's left hand rule in this branch PQ, so you see in the branch PQ the current is acting in the downward direction. So that is being represented by the middle finger, which is blue here. I is acting in the downward direction. The field is along the right. In such a case, the force is represented by the thumb in the upward direction. Now, if you look at the branch RS, in the branch RS, the current is in the upward direction, represented by the middle finger here, and the field is along the right. So here the field is along the right, and then the thumb will show you the downward direction for the force. So you understand that when current is carried in the anti-clockwise direction, as in this coil, then the coil will tend to rotate in clockwise direction. Okay. So the relation for torque. Now what is n cap? You see n cap, what is theta firstly? So theta is the angle between this magnetic field vector B vector and the area vector, direction of the area vector represented by n cap unit vector. So this is theta, here it is 90 degree. So if theta is aligned at some other angle, like here you see, so if B vector is along the right, then n cap, the area vector, is along this way. So this is theta. In some books or in some sources, you find this theta being taken as this angle, or it is we will see it with the help of alpha. We'll take this angle as alpha, and we'll see the other relation for torque. Now, the relation for torque comes out to be, so again I'm avoiding the derivation here. The relation in vector form is Ni A cross B, A cross B. So where A is what? A is equal to L into B, that is area of the coil. Okay, and in scalar form, this relation becomes NiAB sine theta. Now, N is the number of turns in the coil, A is the area of the coil, and theta is the angle between N cap and B vector. Now, we have a special case. Number one, if theta equal to 90 degree, that is the situation which is shown in the figure above, in this figure. Here theta is actually 90 degree, this angle is 90 degree. So if it is 90 degree, then the plane of the loop is actually parallel to B. Okay, you see here the plane of the loop is parallel to B, to the magnetic field. But the area vector is perpendicular to the magnetic field. That means theta will be 90 degree. So when theta is 90 degree, then your tau becomes NIAB. Sin 90 is 1, so NIAB, and this is the value for maximum torque. Number 2, if theta equal to 0 degree. Now in this case, the plane of the loop will be perpendicular to B vector. That means this loop will be aligned in this manner. And in such a case, you see n cap will be directed along B vector. So the angle between n cap and B vector will be 0. So if theta is 0, then tau equals to NIAB cos 0. Sorry, NIAB sin 0, and sin 0 is 0. Therefore, torque comes out to be 0, which is minimum value, which is the minimum value. Now, if you consider, let's see the other relation for this. If you consider this angle to be alpha, okay, so in that case we can write down, if you consider that angle to be alpha, you can write down what, just hold on, yeah, we can write down theta equal to 90 plus alpha, or in general let me write down that alpha plus theta equal to 90 degree, right? That is pretty obvious from the figure. So theta equals to 90 degree plus alpha, sorry, 90 degree minus alpha. So in such a situation, tau equals to NIAB sine theta can be written as NIAB sine 90 minus alpha. So when you have sine 90 minus alpha, this is in the first quadrant, and we'll get all positive, right? So NIAB cos alpha, right? So yeah, we can see the same conditions again. If theta is 90, you see alpha has to become 0 degree in this diagram. If you notice, if theta is 90, theta will occupy the entire, you know, this then alpha, this B vector, or let's consider this situation, right? So when theta is 90, then alpha will be along B vector, alpha will have 0 degree value. I guess this is pretty clear from here. If theta extends up to 90, then alpha will become 0. If theta is 0, then this will be along this way. So in that case, alpha will be 90. So if theta is 90, then alpha is 0, then tau equals to alpha 0 cos 0 is in this relation, right? In this relation, cos 0 is 1, so tau becomes NIAB. Okay, NIAB. And if theta equals to 0 degree, then alpha becomes 90 and cos 90 is 0, so tau equals to 0. So the same results can be reached by the other relation also. So next topic is current loop as a magnetic dipole. So in the first figure, you see that you have a loop carrying current I, and the current is in the anti-clockwise direction. In the second figure, you see the current is in the clockwise direction, right? So if you apply the right hand thumb rule here, so the direction in which the finger curls is showing you the direction of the current. In such a case, the thumb is pointing outside the page. It is showing you the north pole. So we represent north here. The outside the page you have the north pole, behind the page you have the south pole. Now therefore you have two magnetic poles, right? North pole and south pole, and they are separated by a distance. You call this as a magnetic dipole. Similarly, if current is in the opposite direction, then the right hand thumb rule will apply in this manner. You see the current direction is represented by the finger curling. So in that case, this will represent the south, the north will be behind the page. So we have this magnetic dipole moment. Okay, so magnetic dipole moment, which tells you to what extent a dipole experiences torque when put in a magnetic field, when placed in a magnetic field. So magnetic dipole moment is the product of current and the area of the loop, okay, in which the current passes. So IA, the unit is SI unit is ampere meter square. So for n turns, this relation will become m vector equals to NIA. So in terms of this magnetic dipole moment, we can write down the relation for torque, which was NIAB sine theta. Now NIA can be written as M. So this becomes MB sine theta in vector form. And in scalar form, this becomes M cross B. So M cross B is MB sine theta, right? So this is the vector relation, this is the scalar relations. All these four relations are important. So what is the direction of the magnetic dipole moment? It is always from north pole to south pole. The direction of electric dipole moment is from negative to positive. Negative charge to positive charge. Okay, the direction is from south to north. This has to be remembered. Now we will see how an atom behaves as a magnetic dipole. So you see, in an atom, when an electron is revolving, say electron is revolving in this direction, then the direction of the conventional current will be opposite to that of the direction of the electron, right? So the current will pass in this direction, in the anti-clockwise direction. In such a case, if you apply the right hand thumb rule, you will notice that the north pole, the upward up face of the loop is behaving, of the orbit, let me call it, of the orbit is behaving as the north pole, and the down face is behaving as the south pole, right? So the direction of the orbital, here we are calling this magnetic moment as orbital magnetic moment, so denoted by mu l. So mu l is directed from south to north, so mu l is directed in the upward direction. Now what is the direction of the angular momentum? You see, angular momentum relation is L equals to R cross P, R vector cross P vector, right? Now P is the momentum, linear momentum, so R vector cross MV vector, you can write T can be written as MV vector. So M taken out, you have R vector cross V vector. Now if you apply this right hand palm rule, you open your palm and you close your palm. If you remember, we use this for finding out the direction in scalar product. Okay, so A cross B, the C vector or the n cap vector, n cap direction, unit vector direction was found out by using the right hand palm rule. So for that, if you keep your palm open, this part, if you keep your palm open, the fingers are open, and you have to go from R vector to V vector. You have to understand that, you have to note it well. So R vector, if you keep your palm open towards the R vector and then you rotate them, you twist them or you fold them towards the V vector, then you'll see that the direction of the thumb is towards the downward direction, right? And the thumb is towards the downward direction. That will show you the direction of the angular momentum. So here also, like R is directed along this way, V vector is directed along this way. So from R vector to V vector, if your palm is open this way and you fold your palm, fold the fingers, right? You close the palm. In such a case, the L vector will be directed in the downward direction, right? So L is in the downward direction. So here orbital magnetic moment and the angular momentum are in the opposite direction. So we have the relation for orbital magnetic moment as current multiplied by area of the loop, right? So ultimately, after a couple of derivations, you get this as ML equals to EL by twice M. Now in vector form, you'll write this as minus EL vector divided by twice M. Why do you have a minus sign here? The minus sign is because the orbital magnetic moment and the angular momentum is directed opposite. They are directed opposite to each other. Now, the ratio of orbital magnetic moment, orbital magnetic moment and the angular momentum, that is mu L by L. This is called gyromagnetic ratio. This is also called as gyromagnetic constant. So this ratio comes out to be E by twice m, where m is the mass of the electron, E is the charge of the electron. Once you put the values and do the calculations, you'll find this has to be verified. Okay, you have to verify these values. That will be an exercise. So this will get you 8.8 into 10 to the power 10 coulomb per kg. Okay. Now applying Bohr's quantization law, that is L equals to NH by twice pi, you'll get ML equals to ML will the orbital magnetic moment will come out to be NEH divided by 4 pi m. Now when n has the minimum value, that is n equal to 1, you call that as mu L minimum. Okay, you call that is a constant actually, that you call that as Bohr magneton. So when you place n equal to 1, you get this relation as EH by 4 pi m, and using the values and doing the calculation, you will get this as 9.27 into 10 to the power minus 24 into 10 to the power minus 24 ampere meter square. So here we call this minimum orbital magnetic moment as Bohr magneton, denoted by mu b, and the value is 9.27 into 10 to the power minus 24 ampere meter square. Even this value has to be verified. So what is Bohr magneton? It is the orbital magnetic moment of an atom which is circulating in the innermost orbit of the atom. So after this we have moving coil galvanometer. In a moving coil galvanometer, you have a coil. In the setup you have a coil which is attached to with a spring on one end, and at the other end you have a mirror. Okay, and it is like in between, the coil is placed in between a magnetic field, in between two poles of a magnet. It's a radial magnetic field. So at any point of time, the magnetic field makes an angle of 90 degree with the coil. So theta value comes out to be 90 degree here. So here it is shown, the radial magnetic field is shown over here. This is the pointer. So whenever a current passes through the coil, the pointer will move, okay, towards the right. It will show some deflection, and this deflection is is also determined by this mirror, because a light is made to fall on this mirror. When this light is disturbed, right, the reflection of the light is disturbed, you understand that the coil has detected a current. Okay, so the deflecting torque is given by tau equal to NIAB, and the restoration torque, restoring torque, is given by, that is due to the spring, right? So that is given by K phi, where K is the restoring torque per unit twist and phi is the deflection, phi is the twist, okay, due to the current. So under equilibrium condition, what will happen? This K phi can be written as equal to NIAB, right? And I becomes equal to K phi by NA, K phi by NAB. Now you see here, K is the material constant, that is due to the spring. N is the number of turns. A is the area of the coil, and B is the magnetic field. So this K by NAB is a constant which is denoted by G. You call this as galvanometer constant. So the relation comes out to be I equal to G phi, where G equal to K by NAB is the galvanometer constant. So from this relation, what do you get? I is proportional to phi. So greater is the deflection, greater is the amount of current detected by the galvanometer. Now we have sensitivity of a galvanometer. So a galvanometer deflects, when a galvanometer deflects for certain value of current, we call that as current sensitivity, and for certain potential difference, we'll call that as voltage sensitivity. So current sensitivity, we denote this with IS. So IS is phi by I. This is the deflection produced per unit value of current in the galvanometer. So the relation from this above relation, from this particular relation, phi by I comes out to be NAB by K. So current sensitivity relation is NAB by K. So current sensitivity is directly like, you increase the number of turns in the coil, the galvanometer will be more sensitive. You increase the area of the coil, you increase the magnetic field, the galvanometer will be more sensitive. You decrease the value of K, the galvanometer will be more sensitive. So it is inversely proportional to the to the to the K, to the value of K, the restoration torque per unit twist. Now voltage sensitivity, Vs equal to phi per unit potential difference. Okay, so phi by V, so phi by IR you can write down, so it becomes NAB by KR, where R is the resistance of the coil. So again, voltage sensitivity is directly proportional to number of turns, area of the coil, and magnetic field, and it is inversely proportional to K and inversely proportional to the resistance of the coil. Now you know that galvanometer is used to detect current, ammeter is used to measure electric current, and voltmeter is used to measure potential difference. So how do you convert a galvanometer to ammeter? So since you want to measure current, electric current, therefore you have to allow maximum amount of current to pass through the circuit. That means the circuit should have very low resistance. So to obtain low resistance, what you do is, like say you have this galvanometer initially, you have this galvanometer. Okay, so this is the galvanometer. Now with this galvanometer we'll connect a very small resistance, we call this as shunt. Okay, so this shunt is S. Now the total current I which is entering this setup is distributed as Ig and I minus Ig. Okay, so this entire setup is, now this will be the ammeter. This has become the ammeter. So how do you know the value of the shunt necessary? Okay, so now since this is a parallel distribution, since you have connected the shunt resistance, the low resistance in parallel to the galvanometer, so we can write down the voltage across the galvanometer is equal to voltage across the shunt. So therefore voltage across the galvanometer is current multiplied by resistance of the galvanometer, that is G, equal to I minus Ig, the current across the shunt, multiplied by resistance of the shunt S. So S is equal to Ig into G divided by I minus Ig. So this will give you the value of the shunt required. So after having the value of the shunt, what is the effective resistance? What is the value of the effective resistance? Since this is a parallel circuit, so like the relation is 1 by R equals to 1 by R1 plus 1 by R2, and R equals to R1 R2 divided by R1 plus R2. So that is Gs divided by G plus S. G is the resistance of the galvanometer, S is the resistance of the shunt, and since G is much greater than S, then you can write down G plus S as nearly equal to G, and therefore R effective will become Gs divided by G equal to S. So this is the relation for the effective resistance of the ammeter. So resistance of an ideal ammeter should be zero. Why? Because if you want to measure the value of the current, as we have talked about previously, that the resistance should be as low as possible. So the best ammeter is one which has zero resistance. So you allow maximum value of current, maximum amount of current to pass through the circuit, and therefore you can measure what amount of current is, electric current is passing. And secondly, ammeter is always connected in series, is always connected in series in the circuit. Now we see how do we convert a galvanometer to voltmeter. Now in case of a voltmeter, you are measuring the potential difference. So to measure the potential difference, you have to stop current as much as possible. So in that case, to have maximum, you need to have maximum resistance of the voltmeter. So what you do is that in the galvanometer you connect a high resistance in series along with it, right? So if Ig is the current passing, then This setup is now this after connecting the high resistance, this becomes a voltmeter. So the voltage across is given by Ig R plus G. So this setup is what? This setup is the voltmeter now. So we can write down R plus G equals to R plus G equals to V by Ig, and R equals to V by Ig minus G. Now this is the value of the high resistance that you will put in the circuit. The effective resistance is given by, since this is a series circuit, you will straightway add up the individual resistance. This is very high. This will have very high value. So an ideal voltmeter will have very high resistance, that is infinite resistance. Ideal voltmeter will have infinite resistance, and voltmeter is always connected in parallel to the circuit component across which you wish to find out the voltage, you wish to measure the voltage. So that's what we have in today's lecture, and the next that's what we have in the theory of this chapter. We'll start with the questions in the next video. Thank you. Have a great time.